David Cohen è giornalista, editor e fotografo di Los Angeles. Dal 1999 collabora con Variety, rivista nata nel 1905 e specializzata in cinema e televisione. Dal 2006 è editor di V+. Nel suo speech a View, Cohen ha percorso la storia del cinema 3D con alcuni articoli provenienti dall'archivio storico del suo giornale.
Stereoscopic images were already really popular before movies started. So at the time, in the 19th century, stereoscopes were as popular as television is now. They were very common. So as soon as movies came in, people were already looking for a way to bring the experience they'd had with the stereoscope onto the movie screen. Now this proved really difficult because it's one thing to look through a viewer where you can separate the two eyes and just use a postcard with the left and right eye images on it. It's a much more difficult problem to project those images on the screen. You already see advertisements in Variety referring to stereoscopic cinema in the first decade of the 20th century. I honestly don't believe those ads. I think that they were using the word very loosely. I think what you really get is you see the first real experiments with stereoscopic movies in the late 19-teens and the early 1920s. In some ways, those early experiments were very similar to things that are happening today. One very notable experiment from the early 1920s was called Teleview, and it was actually installed in a Broadway theater. And in the Teleview system, they didn't use glasses. They had a viewer at each seat that sat on a gooseneck that you could adjust, attach the seat in front of you, and you looked through a little screen, and what was happening inside this viewer was there was a little wheel spinning like an electric fan that would occlude one eye and then the other in sequence, and it was synchronized to the projectors. It's essentially the same system, the same idea that you see today with active shutter glasses, except it was done mechanically instead of electronically. And the other method that you saw in early 3D experiments were some form of what we call anaglyph, where you have color separation to separate the left and right eye images. It wasn't until the late 1930s that polarized lenses began to be developed. And so that method for 3D, which we're still using today with Real D and Master Image, wasn't available really until after World War II. One thing that's interesting about 3D is there's actually been a 3D boom about every 20 years starting from the 1920s. There was a boom in the 1920s, there was a very big boom in the 1950s, there was another boom in the 1980s, and now we're back in the 2010s with a boom that's the biggest one yet. Now, why did 3D boom in the 1950s? There were a couple of things going on. First of all, the technology seemed to be ready. You had the studios had released 3D shorts. They had been successful before World War II. And then in the late 1940s, television came in and audiences began staying home to watch TV instead of going to the theaters 3 nights a week or more as they had before. So suddenly, audiences were shrinking, people were staying home to watch TV, the movies were looking to do something that TV couldn't do, and 3D was that thing. Now the problem was that the way that Hollywood handled 3D in the 1950s was just unbelievably cynical. Even before those 3D movies were really in theaters and really coming out, the studios were already betting that this was just a gimmick and was going to go away very quickly. So they didn't care if the movies were good. They just were trying to cash in as quickly as possible. They didn't invest in projection, in making sure the quality was high. They didn't invest in good stories. Essentially, they did everything that you would try to do if you wanted 3D to go away as quickly as possible. And in fact, the entire 3D boom of the 1950s was over in less than 18 months. The first 3D hit opened in November 1952, and by May of 1954, Variety was declaring 3D is dead in the United States. It all just happened incredibly fast. The flat answer to that is no, because this 3D boom has already been going on for 4 years, and it's still growing, where the 3D boom of the 1950s was over in 18 months. So by definition, we know that this 3D boom is different. However, I think that there are also a lot of technical problems that have been solved this time. If you look at the 3D of the 1950s, which was done on film, it was very, very difficult to get the interocular or interaxial distance down close enough to get comfortable 3D. So the 3D is very strong and difficult to watch. It was very difficult. There was no video playback, so it was very difficult to look at your dailies and go back and fix something if there was a problem without having to wait 24 hours, and you might not be able to go back and get that set again or get that location again. So it was much more technically difficult. It was much more technically difficult to project. Remember that if the film broke when you were using 2-strip 3D, you had to go out and take the same frame out of both reels, and if you didn't, then your 3D would be off, and that would happen. So many technical challenges have been solved this time. There are still technical challenges remaining, and the biggest technical challenge remaining for 3D right now is brightness. 3D is very dark. You lose a great deal of light with the glasses, and until the brightness can come up on those 3D images, I think the 3D is going to stay a niche product. But the thing is, people wanted to succeed. They wanted to succeed. There was a lot of research money going into solving that problem. I think it is being solved, and you're going to see the first step toward that soon as laser projectors begin to be introduced. What can we learn from the history of 3D that would be applicable to today? Well, first of all, that 3D began as stereoscopic, and it began as a quality mark. It was something that was up there with sound and color as something that movies needed. So there's no reason that it's inherently a gimmick and something that's vulgar or an add-on or any of those things. But we can also learn from history that, as somebody once said, a movie that's bad in 2 dimensions is worse in 3. That 3D really becomes annoying and distracting if the movie is bad to begin with. So in order for 3D to succeed and for people to continue to enjoy it, the people who make movies have to pay attention to quality. They have to pay attention to the quality of production and the technical quality. They have to pay attention to quality of story. And they have to pay very, very careful attention to quality of projection, because if a 3D movie is not presented properly, it's very unforgiving and it will make the audience uncomfortable and in some cases sick.